Okay, let's talk about tyres because one of the people who follow my YouTube channel posted on my Facebook page, my business Facebook page, asking a question about how we manage tyre pressures with respect to driving on gibber versus driving on sand in the desert, and ballpark what figures we use in terms of pressure. Now, I replied to that post on the Facebook page by saying that's not information that I'm going to cover off on my videos, because the intention of my videos is to inform people about what they can expect on a tour if they come with us and how they might prepare for that tour. But you can learn heaps about how to manage tire pressures, how to safely drive on gibber, how to drive in the desert when you come along on one of our tours. The other reason that I'm not going to talk tire pressures on a YouTube channel is because, just like many other things that I've encountered in my 40 odd years of driving four-wheel drive vehicles in the bush, is that there are way too many backyard experts, what the Americans call a Monday morning quarterback. So it's not something that I get out there and spruik in public. What I will tell you is that if you want to get into an argument in a bar amongst those who think they know about four-wheel driving, talk about tire pressures. Guarantee you can get in an argument. So what I will say is this: what most people don't understand about tire pressures is a number of things. One is that the higher the pressure, the greater the chance of punctures. The second point is lots and lots and lots of people think that if you run lower pressures you will get sidewall punctures. Sidewall punctures are extremely rare, and they generally happen in the most extreme terrain where you're rubbing the side of your tyre up against sharp rocks. That can happen in places like the Laura Coach Road, places like that, if you don't put your wheels in the right place. It can also happen if you drive over or right next to very large and very sharp rocks or logs. But the reason people think they get sidewall punctures is because when they get a flat tyre and they go and look at the tyre, the sidewall is damaged. Well, of course the sidewall is damaged. I have to go, hang on. As is often the way, I got interrupted by a phone call. I have to now remember what I was talking about. I was talking about sidewall punctures. So when they inspect the tyre, they see the sidewall damaged. And it's damaged because they drove the tyre while it had insufficient air in it, while it was flat, in other words. And that just damages the sidewall because the sidewall is significantly weaker, and the rim rubbing on it actually destroys it. Also, they get destroyed by high temperature during the high-speed driving. If you get a puncture, the tyre gets very hot. So that's what the sidewall myth is all about. In actual fact, what typically happens in the gibber country and on really sharp gravel is a very high pressure tyre hitting a sharp rock is much more easy to puncture. You get a puncture in the tread, and they're very often quite difficult to see, so people don't notice them and they think they've got a sidewall puncture, but in fact they haven't. So how do you protect yourself against those sidewall punctures? So how do you protect yourself against those tread punctures? Well, you run your tyres about 20% less than what you run them on the highway. Now, you can do that via pressure, and we can show you how you might calculate that pressure using the information that's provided on the tyre, as long as you know what your vehicle weighs. Now, most people don't have a clue what their vehicle weighs, and most people who are on our tours or out in those regions on tour have vehicles that are, dare I say it, well over the manufacturer's GVM limit, gross vehicle mass limit. The reason for that is if you do the calculations on your vehicle brand new, it's probably got 300 or 400 kilos carrying capacity above what's termed its tare weight. Now the tare weight isn't actually empty. Typically it's specified with a certain mass of passenger and a certain mass of fuel, but never full. So if you've got two average weight human beings in there, and you've got water and fuel for this kind of a trip, and then you add a bull bar, an extra spare tyre, you're overweight, right? So yes, you can work it out by numbers. Sure you can, and I can show you how to do that, but you need to know what your vehicle weighs. We can do it by estimation of what your vehicle weighs. I pretty much know what most of them weigh when they're fully loaded, but that's all beside the point. What we use is a footprint method. It's easy to do, difficult to explain, and difficult to explain the justification behind it, except to say that if you don't know your vehicle's weight and you don't know the tyres load rating, which can be God knows what, you can't really make a recommended pressure. I hear all kinds of things. I hear people say, oh, in the Simpson Desert you must run 18 psi. Well, I can tell you now with my Nissan Patrol that was 4.5 tonnes, if I ran 18 psi in those tyres, they'd be pretty flat. So do I need 18? Well, sometimes I ran 18, but most of the time no. So the numbers are not as important as how does the tyre sit on the ground and what's the pressure where it sits about right. And we have rules for how we work that out. It's all done by eyeball. It's all done by my experience, and I'm happy to share that with you. But I'm not going to kind of give you numbers or much information about that over a YouTube channel because I'll get a whole bunch of comments. I'll still get a whole bunch of comments probably now anyway. So, driving on Gibber also takes, just sense, common sense. Drive carefully. So I'll share a story because, my partner and I were driving many years ago. I think it was about 2004. We were driving between Mount Dare and Perney Bore, and those of you who know that track will know that it goes across a great big Gibber plateau before it gets to Spring Creek, and we were driving across there. We were doing about 40 kilometres an hour. We were in a V8 Range Rover, and there happened to be a whole bunch of Range Rovers coming towards us, led by what was then the brand new Mark III Range Rover with its, 20-inch wheels or something. And the guy was absolutely flat. Wow, flat for Gibber country. He was easily doing 110, maybe more, on Gibber. And I said to my partner, oh, let's get off the road here. And he went past us, and I went back on the track, and I remember saying, I hope there's not more of them. Then I heard them talking on the radio back and forth to each other. I said, oh, there is more of them. Anyway, the guy that went past me in this Mark III Range Rover then started talking to me, and I forget what he said exactly, but I remember saying back to him, be careful on this Gibber because it will bite you. And not a few minutes later did I hear that he'd lost control of his vehicle, run off the road, impacted a large boulder, destroyed this $3,000 20-inch wheel. And I also heard that he went into Mount Dare and tried to get a spare wheel. Well, good luck with that. I mean, who stocks a 20-inch mag wheel for a Range Rover? So, common sense, right? Just slow down. Similarly, in the desert country, particularly on the Canning, I've mentioned this before, with its corrugations, I see people, doing 40, 50, 60, 70 k's an hour on these corrugations, trying to, smooth them out by going fast. Well, what you're doing when you smooth them out by going fast is you're actually getting resonance in your suspension. So you're getting your suspension to move in resonance with the ground, which makes it feel smooth. Great, right? No, not great, because when you do those kinds of corrugations at that kind of speed and your shock absorbers going up and down a zillion times a minute, guess what happens? They get incredibly hot. And when they get hot, they destroy the seals. When they destroy the seals, the oil leaks out. When the oil leaks out, you no longer have a shock absorber. No big deal, right? Wrong. When you no longer have a shock absorber and you have a heavily loaded vehicle, particularly if the vehicle has coil springs, but even if it doesn't, what happens is you bottom out the springs. In the case of a coil spring, it's called binding. It's where the coils start to impact each other rather than staying separate. And when the coil springs bind, they pass the impact of the wheel to the chassis directly. So if you want to know why chassis break on the Kenny stock route, it's because the springs are binding, or in the case of leaf springs, the suspension is bottoming out, and that often happens, particularly in the case of coil springs, because you've damaged your shock absorbers beyond repair and they're no longer providing any damping and the spring can just go up and down. So don't overload your vehicle, drive according to the terrain, drive slowly. You know, we do sections of the desert where our average speed is 14, 15, 18 kilometers an hour for the entire day. Why would we go any faster? We're going from A to B. We know how long it takes. That's how long it takes, right? We enjoy ourselves. We look at the scenery, take photographs, take video, get out to let our shock absorbers cool down, whatever we need to do. So, if you want to know about how to manage tire pressures, how to drive on gibber, how to drive in the sand, you know, come along on one of our trips. You will learn so much. You'll also learn how to repair tires. If we have people damaging their tires, you'll get to see how we repair them. You'll get to see how you can learn how to repair tires yourself, how to take them off the rim and put them back on, and how to seat the bead out there in the middle of nowhere. So that's all the point of coming along on one of these trips, is to learn how to do that stuff. I don't impart that kind of knowledge via videos, and the reason is because people will misinterpret it, misrepresent it, and then I'll be in trouble. Come along on my trips, you get days and days and days of hearing why we do things. You get to ask questions, you see it in action, you see it at work, you understand the why. Alright, hope that helps. Thanks for the question, by the way, Stuart.